Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now let's begin. I remember that June evening like it was stitched into my bones. Every creak, every shadow. My name's Riley Becker. I was 14 the summer everything shifted. My mom and I had just landed in Kearney, Nebraska, fresh off the tail end of a messy divorce. We moved into a small square rental on Crescent Hill Drive. Nothing fancy. Peeling shutters, scratchy carpet, a front yard that looked decent if you didn't stare too long. The neighborhood was quiet. Real quiet. Perfect cul-de-sac. Hedges trimmed within an inch of their lives. Neighbors who waved from their driveways but never really stopped to talk. The kind of place that felt like it was holding its breath. I kept to myself, mostly. Spent hours sketching, writing in this tattered old notebook I'd carried around since 5th grade. I wasn't trying to be mysterious or anything. It just made me feel like I still existed, like I wasn't fading into the wallpaper of my new life. Then came Leah Monroe. She lived across the street, in the big white colonial with the wraparound porch and a tire swing that always squeaked in the wind. Leah wasn't like anyone I'd ever met. Glitter eyeliner, chipped black nails, a mouth that didn't flinch at swear words, and this uncanny ability to predict TikTok trends a week before anyone else. She walked into every room like it owed her rent, and somehow, she picked me. At first it was small stuff, waves from her porch, a joke tossed across the street while checking the mail. But then one afternoon, she looked up from painting her toenails on the porch steps and asked if I wanted to come over for a sleepover. Before I could second guess, before my mom could swoop in with rules and reasons, I said yes. I needed out. I needed to not feel like a background extra in my own life. That night felt unreal in the best way. Her house smelled like warm vanilla candles and microwaved pizza rolls. We painted our nails metallic green, scrolled through horror movies on Netflix, and guzzled soda like it was rebellion in a can. We laughed so loud my stomach hurt. It felt like the kind of sleepover scenes you only see in movies, blurry and bright and a little bit unreal. Then, around 10:30, her phone buzzed. She picked it up, and her whole vibe changed. Her fingers clenched around the phone like it might bite her. Her glittery eyes narrowed. "Shit," she muttered under her breath. "What is it?" I asked, leaning over to peek. She turned the screen away. "Caleb's coming." I blinked. "Your brother?" She nodded, slow and heavy. "Yeah. He's not supposed to be here." Something about the way she said it made the room feel colder. I'd heard about Caleb, but only vaguely. Leah had mentioned once, offhandedly, like it burned to say it, that he used to live there but had moved out over a year ago. Drugs, fights, maybe worse. Her parents never mentioned him, and she never filled in the blanks. I didn't press, but now, his name alone flipped the whole sleepover on its head, like a record scratch at the worst possible time. "He's not violent, right?" I asked, unsure why my voice felt small. Leah didn't answer right away. She stood slowly, crossed the room, and peeled back the curtain just an inch. "No," she said, almost to herself. "Not violent, just, he's not well." Then we heard it. The screen door creaked open downstairs. No knock. No announcement. Just the slow, familiar sound of someone walking in like he belonged. Leah stiffened by the window, her body tense. I joined her, heart thudding. When I looked down, I saw him. Caleb Monroe. Tall, probably 6 foot, but gaunt in that brittle, starved way. His hoodie hung off him like it belonged to someone else. His jeans were ripped and stained. His hair was messy, sticking out like he'd been sleeping in the street. But it was his eyes that got me. Wide and glassy, ringed with shadow, flickering with something I couldn't name. Something not right. He didn't even pause at the front door. Just walked around to the back and slipped inside like he'd done it 1,000 times. No keys, no welcome. The door slammed behind him, and it was like the house inhaled and forgot how to exhale. Muffled voices started from the kitchen. At first, low, then sharp, like knives clinking in a drawer. "You owe me." Caleb's voice, ragged, unhinged. "You stole everything from me." His father's voice followed, steady but strained. "You can't be here, Caleb. We've talked about this." "I want my money." "There is no money," the father insisted. "You need help." "You think I don't know what you did?" Caleb's voice cracked. "I'm not crazy." Leah turned away from the window, her face drained. "Come on," she whispered. "We're going upstairs." We didn't talk. We just moved, fast, up the stairs into her room, door locked behind us. Leah shoved her desk in front of the door, the legs screeching against the hardwood. I helped without needing to ask. Something about the way she moved told me this wasn't the first time. I just helped push the desk into place, hands shaking. "What's he even talking about?" I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. Leah shook her head, eyes fixed on the door like it might dissolve. "He always thinks someone's out to get him," she murmured. "Says people are watching him through the blinds. Thinks Dad's hiding money from him or working with people to screw him over. It's like something just snaps." My hand hovered over my phone. The screen lit up my fingers as I tapped open the dial pad, thumb pausing over 911. "Should we call?" Then it happened. Bang. The sound cracked through the air like it came from inside my own skull. Leah gasped, hands flying to her mouth. I froze. My heart stopped, just for a second. Then came a scream, high and sharp, definitely a woman's, followed by a crash, and Caleb's voice, louder, ragged, unraveling. "They were going to sell me out. You think I don't see it? You all lied to me." Another bang. We didn't wait to process it. We bolted for the window. The roof sloped steeply outside, but we didn't hesitate. Leah popped the screen with practiced ease and swung a leg over, barefoot. I followed, adrenaline dulling the sting of everything. The rough shingles, the cold air, the sheer terror pressing on my lungs. We crawled on our hands and knees across the shingles, the night stretching around us, stars above like a cruel joke. Just as we reached the edge, we heard the sliding door below creak open. I looked down. Caleb stepped into the yard, his eyes scanning, his face lifted like he could smell our fear. And then he said it. Leah, too calm, too deliberate. That word wrapped in a voice that didn't match. "You're not leaving me too." And then he raised it. A gun. Long, black, sharp against the night sky like a void made solid. "Go!" I hissed. We jumped. The landing knocked the breath out of me. We crashed onto the trash bins, metal clanging, plastic cracking beneath us. The bins toppled, cans and bottles spilling like coins across the driveway. I felt something snap in my ankle, white-hot pain, but I didn't stop. We ran. Through the neighbor's yard, trampling flowers, weaving between parked cars. We didn't scream. Somehow we knew, screaming would only give him a beacon. Sound would be a target. I didn't even know where we were going until I saw it. A garage, door cracked open, light spilling onto the driveway like safety. A man stood inside, dressed in grease-stained overalls, leaning over a workbench. He looked up, eyes wide at the sight of us. "Help!" I gasped, dragging Leah behind me. "Please, he's got a gun!" He didn't ask a single question, just pulled us inside, slammed the door, and bolted the lock with one hard motion. "You girls stay down," he said firmly, already grabbing his phone. "I'm calling the cops." And thank God they came fast. By the time flashing lights lit up the cul-de-sac, Caleb was gone. A neighbor had heard the shots. Someone else saw us running. The 911 calls piled up like dominoes. Inside the Monroe house, they found Mr. Monroe slumped in the kitchen, a single shot to the chest. Mrs. Monroe was still breathing, barely, collapsed near the sink with a gunshot wound in her shoulder. Blood on the tile. Dishes shattered like glass confetti. Caleb had run. On foot. They found him a few hours later, curled behind a dumpster at the middle school, muttering about shadows and betrayal, eyes glassy, mouth slack. He didn't fight, didn't speak, just went limp as they cuffed him. Leah's aunt came from Iowa the next morning. She didn't say much, packed boxes quickly, hugged me once like she meant it, and said, "Thank you." Then they were gone. I never saw Leah again. It's been almost 4 years now. I still live on Crescent Hill. My mom wants to leave, but I won't let her. I don't even fully understand why. Maybe if I stay, it proves it was real. That I didn't imagine any of it. That what happened mattered. I still wake up in the middle of the night drenched in sweat, hearing that first gunshot echo through my skull. My ankle aches when it rains. I flinch when someone knocks too hard. I don't do sleepovers. I haven't since that night. Every couple of months I text Leah, just to say hi, to tell her I hope she's okay. She never replies, but I keep doing it, hoping she reads them, hoping she remembers that we made it out. Because I learned something that night. Not just about fear, but about people. About how laughter and violence can live in the same house. How monsters don't crawl out from under your bed. They come through the back door, and sometimes they know your name. Sometimes they're family. So trust your gut. Speak up. Take yourself seriously. Not every threat looks like danger. Sometimes it looks like someone you've known your whole life. But safety? Safety starts the moment you stop pretending everything's fine and start listening to that quiet little voice inside that whispers, "Get out." I arrived in Helena, Montana on a bitter March afternoon, the kind where the wind cuts straight through your coat. Snow clung stubbornly to the sidewalks. The sky hung low and dull like wet wool. I was pulling Milo behind me in his car seat carrier, my arms sore, my mind numb. The custody battle in Colorado had gutted me. The divorce only finished the job. I wasn't looking for happiness, just quiet. A cul-de-sac lined with red brick homes and leafless elms was the best I could hope for. 49 Willowcrest Lane. I'd signed the lease that morning. Desperation made it easier to ignore how rushed it all felt. The place smelled like cold wood and lemon cleaner. Milo, my 4-year-old with soft brown curls and big eyes that once overflowed with questions, had barely said 10 words since the judge signed the papers. His therapists called it speech delay, but I knew better. It was grief. But when he looked at me, even now, he still smiled. That smile was what kept me standing. I was midway through unpacking a box labeled "Kitchen, Fragile," when I heard a knock. Not urgent, just present. A man stood at the door, mid-30s, lean, clean-shaven, with neat blonde hair under a trucker cap, a red flannel shirt and jeans. In his hands were a Tupperware of cookies and a small packet of goldfish crackers. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he said, voice calm and even. His eyes were friendly but not overeager. He leaned against the doorframe like he'd done this 100 times before. "Milo loves those," I said, nodding at the goldfish. My shoulders loosened. Someone had noticed him, noticed us. He stepped inside when I gestured, placing the snacks on the kitchen counter. "Derek Vale. I live across the street, house with the woodpile." We shook hands. His palm was rough, like he'd actually worked with it. I mentioned the baby swing I still hadn't managed to put together. He offered to take a look. Down in the cold, unfinished basement, Derek tightened loose bolts without needing to read the manual. He moved confidently, like he belonged in spaces where things needed fixing. "Did landscaping for a while," he said as he worked. "If you ever need help with snow or hedges or whatever, just knock." I hesitated. I didn't know this man, but he seemed kind, competent, and I was tired of shouldering everything alone. "I'd appreciate it," I said. After he left, Milo nibbled the goldfish quietly on the living room rug. I knelt next to him. "Derek seems nice, huh?" Milo looked up, and for the first time since we'd left Colorado, he nodded. Just a small one. but it was something. That night, lying in bed surrounded by half-opened boxes and the quiet hum of a new furnace, I felt a flicker of gratitude, something I hadn't allowed myself in months. 2 weeks passed in a blur. Therapy appointments, grocery runs, Milo clinging to me at drop-offs, and Derek. Derek became a fixture. He kept his word, showing up to trim the hedges exactly when he said he would. Then he brought over dinner one night, chicken noodle soup in a mason jar. He didn't leave right away. Sat on the edge of the couch, asking gentle questions. "You said you moved here after a custody fight?" he asked. I nodded, keeping my eyes on Milo, who was building towers out of soup cans on the floor. "My brother went through that," Derek continued. "Lost his kids. Court didn't care about his side. It messes you up." There was sympathy in his voice. Real or not, I couldn't tell, but I nodded, more out of habit than trust. Then came the drawing. One evening, after a rainy morning of errands, I found it tucked under the welcome mat. A crayon sketch. Me and Milo holding hands, Derek standing beside us. All of us beaming with cartoonish smiles. In the corner, a red heart. My throat tightened. I looked up and down the street. Empty driveways, curtains drawn. Nothing moved. Inside, I stared at the drawing again. "He's just being friendly," I whispered. But the smile I wore as I slid the paper into the trash didn't reach my eyes. Later that afternoon, while I folded laundry in the living room, Milo came padding in, cradling something against his chest. "Found it in the trash," he said, and unzipped his jacket to reveal a half-used journal. "Where?" I asked, already uneasy. "Over there." He pointed across the street, to Derek's driveway. When he fell asleep during his usual afternoon nap, I sat on the floor and opened the journal. The handwriting was tight, anxious, all written in second person. "You smile when I talk to your son. You don't know you already belong to me. You fold the page when you think no one sees." My hands trembled. Every word was a snapshot of moments I thought had passed unnoticed. Details too specific, too close. I felt sick. I closed the journal and pressed it to my chest. Milo stirred on the couch. I went to him and said gently, "Sweetheart, why did you take this?" "I just like coloring," he mumbled. Then he turned away. That night I locked the journal in the filing cabinet under Bill's and Milo's therapy notes. I didn't open it again. I didn't answer the door anymore either. On March 2nd, 2022, I was finishing paperwork at the kitchen table, the house dark except for the under-cabinet light glowing over the sink. My phone buzzed, a text from one of the neighbors. "Hey April, quick question. Did you see Derek in your backyard with a shovel?" I froze. The room tilted slightly. My ears rang. I turned toward the back window. The porch light was off. The yard was cloaked in shadow. And just like that, the quiet I'd been chasing unraveled. I bumped into Milo on my way to the door. He was on the floor, legs tucked under him, coloring with quiet focus. I shot off a quick reply to the neighbor. "No." Then I grabbed my coat and flew outside without another word. The backyard was still. Nothing out of place, no shovel, no prints in the snow-dusted grass, just wind and shadows. I stood there breathing hard, every hair on my arms lifted. Behind me, the door creaked. Milo had followed. "Why are you running, Mama?" he asked, wrapping his little fingers around mine. I crouched to his level and forced a smile. "Just checking for a package," I said. "I think the mail got delayed again." He nodded, accepting the half-truth with the calm only children carry when they've seen too much change too fast. That night, as I picked up toys and folded blankets, something caught my eye. The bedroom window. It was cracked open, just barely, but wide enough. I froze. My chest tightened. I checked the drawer where I kept the spare key. Empty. I dialed the police with shaking hands, waded through the endless hold music, but the phone died in my palm before I could say a word. I didn't dare move Milo. I just sat beside him while he slept, my legs numb, ears tuned to every creak in the house, every tick of the walls, every gust of wind outside. After that, Derek stopped bringing cookies. No more soup, no more dinners left in Tupperware on the porch. But something worse began. Notes. One on the gas meter, fluttering slightly in the breeze. Another taped to my car window. One folded and slipped under the doormat. I know you're scared. I'm just trying to protect what's mine. I wiped my eyes. My throat burned. I buried that note at the bottom of the trash bin under soggy leftovers and a bag of used coffee grounds. I wanted to believe it was over. But it wasn't. One night, after returning from a freelance client meeting, I sensed something off the second I pulled into the driveway. The porch light was already on. The living room glowed warmly, the lamp I never left on humming quietly. I stepped inside and immediately locked the door behind me. "Milo?" I called. "Anyone here?" No answer. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon. I walked toward the kitchen table, every step dragging like through wet cement. Then I saw them, a plate of cookies, still warm. Next to it, a USB flash drive, and a note in clean, deliberate handwriting. "We were almost a family. I wanted to show you what could have been." My heart dropped into my stomach. I swiped the USB, shoving the cookies aside like they might burn me. I backed into the bedroom and shut the door behind me, half expecting to find someone waiting inside. I locked it, hands fumbling. Milo was asleep. Safe. I opened the laptop, plugged in the drive. A single folder. Moments. I clicked it open. Dozens of photos, maybe 100. All of them taken inside my house. One of me making breakfast. Another of Milo building Legos on the rug. A grainy close-up of my face, exhausted, unaware. Then night vision. I choked. Me sleeping on the couch. Me curled under the blanket in bed. Some photos had been taken after I'd locked the window, after I'd hidden the spare key, after I'd stopped answering the door. He'd been inside, the journal, the crayon drawing, the shovel. It had all escalated slowly, steadily, like a noose tightening. Ownership, obsession. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed a duffel, threw in Milo's shoes, diapers, meds, essentials, shoved clothes into my backpack, lifted Milo into my arms, and crept barefoot out the side gate. We didn't even stop for coats. Socks only. I drove 30 miles east through a freezing rainstorm until I found a rundown motel with blinking vacancy lights and a clerk who didn't ask questions. We stayed there for days. Then we moved again. A rented house in a gated community, buzz-in entry, no exceptions. I installed locks, deadbolts, chains, alarms, covered every window, got blinds thick enough to block headlights. Milo started speech therapy again, and slowly the fog in his eyes lifted. He began to talk. "Mama," he said, clearer than ever before. Then, "I love you," one night as we built a pillow fort in the new living room. I slept for the first time in weeks, light, uneasy sleep. But it was sleep. Until 2 months later, when the mail came, an envelope with no return address. Inside, one sentence. "You'll always be mine." Same handwriting. I didn't show it to Milo. I shredded it, then pressed the shreds deep into the mulch lining the front yard, under flowerless bushes. I wish I could say that was the last of it. I wish I could say Derek was arrested, that he disappeared forever. But I know better. Derek Vale wasn't just a neighbor. He was a stranger who found his way in, quietly, repeatedly. I installed 3 deadbolts across every door, cameras, motion lights. I replaced the bedroom window entirely, with one that locks from the inside and doesn't open from outside no matter how much force is used. Now, I don't trust kindness without permission, because kindness without boundaries turns into entitlement. A hand offered too eagerly becomes a hand that reaches where it doesn't belong. It's good to accept help, but you have to know when help turns invasive, when it starts watching, claiming, crossing thresholds. Always trust the unease in your gut, because when someone stops seeing your home as sacred as yours, they become a danger, and danger often smiles first. Some stories don't start with a bang. They begin with something quieter, an oppressive silence that sinks into your bones, curling around your throat like a hand, and stays long after the noise is gone. I moved to Alderwood Lane after what the newspapers called my breakdown. I never liked that word. It made it sound loud, dramatic, but mine wasn't. It was quiet. A stop. One day I just couldn't. Couldn't get out of bed. Couldn't face another classroom full of middle schoolers. Another phone call with a parent blaming me for their kids' failing grades. Another meeting where I had to pretend like I was okay. After 15 years of teaching, I burned out in the softest, scariest way imaginable. I took medical leave, boxed up my apartment in Philadelphia, and left. My doctor said I needed peace, a place where the world didn't hum so loud, where I could breathe again. I chose Dover, Delaware, small, quiet, a little out of the way. Alderwood Lane looked like something off a postcard. Vinyl-sided homes lined up neatly, all with perfect hedges and identical mailboxes. Kids rode their bikes in lazy loops around cul-de-sacs. Dads mowed their lawns in mirrored Nike shoes. Moms swapped slow cooker recipes on porches, all sun hats and wine spritzers. But number 9 always felt off. The Reynolds place was colder, and I don't mean the temperature. It was something else. An atmosphere. A subtle wrongness that made your skin prickle. Don Reynolds had the energy of a man who slammed his car door whether anyone was watching or not. His voice didn't carry. It barked. Angry. Clipped. His wife Sharon was almost invisible. I only ever saw her in scrubs, slipping into her car just after sunset like clockwork. She never lingered, never smiled. And then there was Billy. 12 years old but small, almost fragile. Always wearing hoodies 3 sizes too big, the sleeves dangling past his hands. Pale, like he didn't get out much. He'd linger near windows, staring out like a ghost peeking through a veil. I'd wave sometimes when I passed by. He never waved back. I didn't set out to watch them. I just noticed things. Little things. The shouting after dark. Billy missing school for days at a time. The way I once saw him in the driveway, clutching a thick book to his chest like a shield, a deep bruise shadowing the skin beneath one eye. That was the night I started writing things down. Dates, times, what I heard, what I saw. I kept it all in a spiral notebook. After 2 weeks, I called Child Protective Services, gave them everything. A woman came out, stayed 12 minutes. She smiled politely when I met her by her car. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, she said. But I knew better. I recognized that silence, the brittle, teeth-grinding quiet of a home balancing on fear. I'd lived in one once, long ago. It snowed the night it happened, December 14th. The soft kind of snow that dusts everything in false purity, like a fresh coat of paint trying to cover mold. I remember because I was taking the trash out, a black bag slung over my shoulder, slippers crunching lightly on the icy driveway. That's when I saw it. Number 9's front door, wide open. No lights, no voices, just that open door, hanging slightly ajar like it had been waiting. I stood still for a second. Then cautiously, I called out, "Everything okay over there?" Nothing. No shuffle. No creak. Not even a reply from inside. I hesitated. Something in my chest tightened. Not fear exactly, more like the moment just before something slips and shatters. I crossed the street. The cold cut through my sweater, sharp and biting, but something else pricked at my skin too. Unease. I stepped onto the porch and leaned in. The hallway inside was dark, the only light a flickering blue glow from the living room, probably a television left on. And on the floor, just past the welcome mat, lay an aluminum baseball bat, clean on one end, smeared with blood on the other. A trail of it led toward the kitchen. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. "Billy?" I called softly. A shuffle. Then silence. Then footsteps. He appeared slowly, as if he'd been waiting for his cue, emerging from the shadows of the kitchen. He stood at the sink, back to me, his small frame eerily still. He was washing his hands, methodically, carefully, the way you'd clean up paint after spilling it during art class. Not rushed, not panicked, just precise. I took a shaky step forward. "Billy, is your dad home?" He didn't answer at first, just reached for the towel, dried his hands, folded it with perfect corners, and finally turned around. His eyes were glassy, far away. His voice, when it came, was flat. Not cold, just empty. He stopped yelling, he said. My stomach dropped. I backed away slowly, my fingers trembling as I pulled out my phone. My voice cracked as I spoke into the receiver. "There's been, I don't know, something's wrong. At my neighbor's house. There's blood. A child. Please, please come quick." I stayed outside after that. Never stepped into the house. Because something in Billy's face, something about how calm he was, told me the screaming had stopped hours ago. And whatever had broken in that house was already far beyond repair. The first officer pulled up in just under 7 minutes. I watched from my living room window across the street, heart thudding, hands still trembling. He stepped out of his cruiser with one hand hovering near his holster, eyes scanning, tense. A second unit arrived moments later, backup. Then came the yellow tape, the flashing blue and red lights, paramedics rushing forward with urgency, but not panic. They brought Billy out last. He wasn't crying, wasn't shaking, just stood there in the snow, blinking up at the flakes melting on his sleeves like it was the first time he'd seen winter. He stared at them, quiet, distant. His lips didn't move. His eyes didn't search for anyone. He looked hollow. I crossed the street slowly, hesitantly, and approached one of the officers as he spoke into his radio. Is Billy okay?" The officer turned, glanced at me. His expression was unreadable. He didn't answer at first, just studied me, then finally said, "We'll need a statement." That was all. It wasn't until the next morning that everything came into focus. The story that slowly unfolded made the headlines, but not the truth. Not all of it. Don Reynolds was found in the hallway, killed by blunt force trauma to the head. The weapon, an aluminum baseball bat, the same one I'd seen. Sharon Reynolds was discovered in the master bedroom. Unresponsive. They found an empty bottle of pills on the floor beside her hand. No suicide note, just her curled up in the fetal position, as if bracing for a storm that had already passed. Billy hadn't called anyone. He'd sat by the floor heater, knees tucked into his chest, humming softly to himself, for nearly 2 hours. Later, after the case was closed, I learned more than I wanted to know. Billy had kept a notebook, almost identical to mine. Every fight, every bruise, every threat, all dated, written in neat block letters like school assignments. His teachers never followed up, neighbors never checked in. CPS came once and left, and when no one came to save him, Billy did what no 12-year-old should ever be forced to do. I kept asking myself, why didn't I do more? Why didn't I knock harder, call twice, shout, force someone to listen? But deep down I knew the answer. People don't want to believe children are truly in danger. It's easier to think, it's just yelling. Just a rough week. Just stressed parents. I was that teacher once, the one who chalked up a quiet student's withdrawn behavior to personality, who believed that if CPS didn't intervene, then everything must be fine. But that night on Alderwood Lane broke that illusion into shards. Billy was placed in a psychiatric care facility. They said he talked to the walls, whispered questions to the air, smiled at corners of the room like something invisible sat there beside him. They said he wasn't aggressive, just dissociated, fragmented, floating in and out of reality. A child whose mind had fractured under the weight of fear. He was deemed unfit for trial. His diagnoses read like a nightmare: trauma-induced psychosis, PTSD, prolonged dissociative disorder. And his notebook, the one the detective eventually handed me, ended with a single line: written in red ink. I waited for someone to save me. They never came. I went back to teaching a few months later, part-time, a small district, special education and support services. The work is slower, gentler. The kids are different now. Or maybe I am. Billy's notebook sits in my desk drawer, beneath lesson plans and student drawings. The detective gave it to me after the case closed. He mentioned you, he'd said. Said you were the only one who noticed. But noticing wasn't enough. So now, when I hear shouting behind a door that should hold laughter, I write it down. I knock, I ask, I call, even if no one picks up. Even if the reports vanish into systems that fail. Because Billy's story wasn't just about the violence, it was about the silence that let it grow. A silence that wrapped itself around a child and left him to endure it alone. The neighborhood has moved on. Number 9 has a new family now. A dog, 2 little girls who draw pastel rainbows and stars on the driveway with sidewalk chalk. I watch them sometimes, not out of suspicion, out of care. Because once, not so long ago, a boy stood in that same window, just watching, just waiting for someone to knock. Silence protects the abuser. Speaking up protects the child. We all have the power and the responsibility to notice, to listen, to act. Pretending not to see suffering doesn't erase it. It only pushes it deeper where it festers until one day it breaks free in the worst possible way. So if you hear something, say something. Because one day, the child next door might stop waiting. Flagstaff always felt like a liminal space to me, close enough to Phoenix to feel familiar, but nestled deep enough in the pines that you could vanish if you needed to. And I needed to. After dropping out of college and watching my savings evaporate in Tempe, I took a copywriting job at a small ad agency and moved north. I told myself I was starting over, less chaos, less pressure, less noise. The duplex I moved into was nothing special. Beige stucco chipped in long, spidery lines down the sides, and the shutters looked like they'd once been blue before years of sun drained them dry. Still, it was cheap. Quiet. A narrow driveway separated my unit from the one across, number 307. That's where I first saw her. She was almost always by the window around dusk. A girl in her early 20s, maybe a couple years younger than me. Short, dark hair, skin so pale it caught and reflected the soft light of her desk lamp. She'd sit with a chipped mug in hand, sketching into a battered notebook. Her pencil would glide steadily, her eyes occasionally lifting, not just to the street but sometimes to me. We never spoke, never exchanged names or introductions. But there was something rhythmic about our brief exchanges, quiet acknowledgments that gradually became their own form of language. It began with simple eye contact. Then came the subtle nods. Later, slow waves that felt almost ceremonial. I still remember the first time she smiled at me. It was late. I'd just come back from Fry's with a couple grocery bags digging into my wrist. When I glanced up, there she was, her face lit softly by the glow of her lamp. She smiled, not big, not performative, just a quiet, patient curve of her mouth, like she'd been waiting for me to return. I smiled back, surprised by how much that small moment warmed me. Then I slipped inside. Something about it stuck with me, a quiet understanding that neither of us lived loudly, that maybe we liked it that way. We weren't friends, but we noticed each other. That felt like enough. Then came September 2nd. That evening, at exactly 6:18 p.m., I was standing by my window. The sun bled gold and copper behind the rooftops, soft light bending around the pine branches. She was there again, Nora. I'd finally learned her name from the tiny metal mailbox labeled Sutton. She looked calm, mug cradled between both hands, her gaze soft and distant. I lifted my hand, tentative. We hadn't waved in a few days, but she responded, gave me that same familiar half smile. Peaceful, present, so alive. I almost crossed the driveway. I almost knocked on her door. Something inside me itched to connect, to make it real. But I didn't. I don't know why. I still think about that. Because the next morning, a police cruiser pulled up in front of 307. Two people in plain clothes got out, walked up with keys. I watched from behind the curtain, heart thumping for no logical reason. Minutes later, I heard murmured voices outside, one of the agents talking to an older neighbor I'd never met. I slipped out onto my porch just in time to catch a single sentence. Nora Sutton died last night. Car accident, around 6:05 p.m. I froze. My mind blanked. That couldn't be right. I waved to her at 6:18. I saw her face, her smile, that soft glow around her, but 6:05, time of death. 6:18, time I waved. 13 minutes. I clung to logic. Maybe they had the time wrong. Accidents don't have precise timestamps. Maybe she died later. Maybe they meant a different Nora Sutton. Maybe she had a twin, a sister, someone who looked like her. I told myself that over and over, looped it in my head like a broken record. That day I wandered the apartment, flipping the TV on and off without watching anything. The mug she'd always held sat untouched on my table. I couldn't even remember setting it there. Her window across the driveway stayed dark. No lamp, no flickering movement, no Nora. That night I searched her name. There wasn't much. A local news blurb. Young woman killed in two-vehicle crash on Route 180. Single occupant, age 21. Survived by no immediate family. That line. No immediate family. No sister. No one else lived in that unit. Still, I told myself, maybe someone was house-sitting. A friend clearing out her things. I needed that to be true. Then came September 5th. I was restless, couldn't sleep. My stomach felt like it had been twisted into a knot. Around 6:15, I poured myself a glass of wine, more out of habit than desire. I walked over to the window. Something moved. Just a twitch of the curtain in 307. A flutter, like someone had brushed past it. I stepped closer, until my forehead was nearly pressed to the glass. The curtain pulled back, just a crack, maybe 2 inches, and in that space I saw it. Pale skin, a sliver of cheek, and an eye staring back at me. I dropped the wine. It didn't shatter, just thudded against the carpet, soaking in red. My heart clawed at my chest. I backed away, breath ragged. When I dared to look again, the window was dark. Still, I didn't sleep that night. Every thought I had tried to reason it away. Squatters, a relative, a property manager doing a late cleaning. But who would sit in the exact same chair? At the same time Nora always had. Who would pull the curtain like that, slow and deliberate? The next morning, I found something slid under my door. A single page, folded. No name, no note. Just a single pencil sketch, folded once down the middle and left under my door like a message. The lines were soft but intentional, each stroke full of care. It was me, sitting on my couch, hair tied back loosely, chin tilted just so, the way I always angled it when deep in thought. Not just detailed, exact, accurate in a way that made my skin crawl. There were things in that sketch no one could have seen unless they were watching from across the street, watching carefully. The curve of my ankle tucked under the cushion, the chipped coffee mug on the side table, a barely noticeable scar near my temple, only visible when the light hit a certain way. It was drawn from across the driveway, drawn by someone who had been dead for 4 days. I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't. What would I even say? That the girl in 307, the one who smiled at me once and never spoke, had drawn me, after she died? That I'd waved at a ghost? That I was being haunted, not with screams or slamming doors, but with attention, with presence? No. I kept quiet. I slipped the sketch into a drawer and shoved it closed like that could trap the unease inside. For the next week, I lived with my curtains drawn. Routine became my defense. Wake up, coffee, emails, meet my deadlines. But every evening, without fail, Around 6:18 p.m., I'd feel it, this pressure in the air, a static hum almost like holding your breath for too long. One night I turned off the lights early and crouched by the window in the dark. I waited, barely breathing, eyes locked on the opposite window. And at exactly 6:18 the curtain stirred. There she was, the faint outline of her cheek behind the glass, pale and still, watching. I don't know why, but I whispered, "What do you want?" She didn't answer. She just looked. And somehow that silence was worse than any scream. Days passed, then weeks. I told myself it was over. Until September 20th. That morning I opened my mailbox and found a white envelope. No stamp, no return address, just slid in like a whisper. Inside was a single blank page, crisp, untouched. But the second I held it, that familiar cold rippled up my arms. That same hush I felt by the window. I tucked it into the drawer beside the sketch and didn't open the curtains again. October settled in. The leaves in Flagstaff turned brittle and orange, drifting down like confetti from a parade no one celebrated. My routines shrank. I avoided going out at night. I avoided the living room after dusk. The blinds stayed shut, corners taped down, but still the weight lingered. No footsteps, no whispers, no cheap jump scares. Just quiet. I'd feel her most when everything else stopped. When the tea cooled in my hands, when I stared at my laptop screen too long, when the world went still and I forgot to fill the silence. That's when she felt closest, like someone waiting for me to notice again. So I started playing music, even static if nothing else. I just needed sound to push back against the stillness. On Halloween, I packed a bag and drove to Prescott. Told an old friend I needed a reset, something about the altitude and the quiet creeping under my skin. I didn't mention Nora, not a word. When I came back, first thing I did was check the mailbox, another envelope. White, unmarked, sealed from the inside, empty. A year passed, then another. But every September 3rd, I'd find an envelope waiting, sometimes a sketch, sometimes nothing, sometimes something else. A paperclip bent into a soft wave, a dried flower I didn't recognize, a tiny swatch of faded fabric, the exact color of the old curtains from 307. The apartment stayed empty. I made sure of that. Last year, I finally asked Don, the landlord, just to confirm. He scratched his beard and shrugged. Every time we list it, renters pull out. Always say something about the window, weird feeling, bad dreams. I stopped asking. I could have left too. Almost did. But something about her. It never felt threatening. She wasn't angry. She didn't want revenge. She wasn't punishing me. She was just watching, noticing me the way I noticed her. And maybe that was enough to keep her here. Maybe no one else ever did. I haven't waved again, not once. But sometimes when I'm feeling brave, I'll sit near the window. I'll turn on the lamp, pour myself a coffee, open a sketch pad. And for a moment I imagine her there, across the driveway, desk light aglow, pencil in hand, head tilted thoughtfully as she draws. And I'm not alone. Neither is she. Because when you really notice someone, see them in their quiet, in their stillness, that connection doesn't just fade. It lingers. It roots itself in the spaces between silence. Not all hauntings are screams in the dark. Some are softer. Some are memory. So be kind to those who sit in silence. You never know who's still watching. Some houses hide their truths behind smiles and siding. Ours did. 212 Mayflower Drive, Beckley, West Virginia. White with gray shutters, a crooked tire swing swaying only in storms. The lawn always looked like it was just about to be mowed, but never was. Porch light flickering like a nervous tick. People called it homey. "You've got a full house there," the mailman would say as we stood outside. We'd all smile. Not the warm kind. The kind that says, "Please don't ask. Please don't look." There were 5 of us. I was the 3rd. Callie Brooke Pearson, born on a stormy Wednesday. Matt was the oldest. Then Becca, then me, Kyle, and little Jenna. All born in the same hospital, raised under the same roof with the same rules. Speak only when spoken to. Pray before meals. And don't cry. Crying only made it worse. Our parents, Linda and Keith Pearson, were saints in public, gods at home. We went to church every Sunday, brought brownies to the potluck. Dad shook hands like a politician. Mom smiled like a pageant queen. "You have such a beautiful family," they'd say. But inside that door, different world. I can't say when it started. Maybe when Becca got dragged across the kitchen by her hair for wasting peanut butter. Maybe when Matt flinched just because someone raised their voice. Maybe when I stood locked in a closet for 4 hours because I folded towels wrong. We didn't say abuse. Mom called it discipline. "This is God's way," she'd whisper after the belt hit your back. "I correct those I love." Dad didn't talk much when angry. Just clenched his jaw, swung whatever was close. Belt, pan, boot, fist. Once he shoved Kyle so hard into the wall his lip split open. Blood left a mark. Mom handed us rags and said, "Clean it." We didn't know our neighbors. We didn't have phones. School was something you earned if you were good. I was lucky. I got to go. I was the one who babysat after school. They called it watching the others. I called it surviving. Matt ran away when he was 15. Took a bag, slipped into the woods, never came back. Dad said he was dead. Mom said it was God's mercy. That's when I started keeping track. Dates, bruises, punishments. I wrote them in tiny print in the back of an old Bible. It was my secret ledger, my proof. If they found it, I knew they'd destroy it. Maybe me too. But I wasn't planning to run. Not yet. I wrote it down because someone had to remember. August in Beckley was thick and wet. The kind of heat that didn't lift, even after dark. August 11th, 2019. The air pressed against the windows like sweat. I saw the clock blink, 11:47 p.m., right before I heard Jenna scream. She was just 8. I shot out of bed, heart in my throat, and ran. Dad had her by the wrist, yelling about a water stain on the living room rug. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," she cried again and again, her voice shrinking with every word. Then he hit her. Hard. She fell sideways, her head cracking against the baseboard. That sound, her skull, the wall, it split something inside me wide open. I stepped between them. "Stop." He froze. For half a second, then his face twisted. "You talking back now?" he growled, stepping toward me. "I'm done," I said, barely breathing. "You're not touching her again." "Callie, go to your room," Mom hissed from the hallway. Arms crossed, face blank. I looked down at Jenna, curled in on herself, one hand on her shoulder, blinking fast to keep from crying. That was it. Not tomorrow, not someday, tonight. I waited. After they went to bed, I stayed on the floor with Jenna, brushing her hair back until she slept. "Just a bad dream," I whispered. "Almost over." By 10:03 a.m., I was in the kitchen, stuffing 2 backpacks, granola bars, crackers, water, my school ID, Jenna's birth certificate, and the few crumpled bills I'd hidden behind the loose baseboard in my room. I crept room to room. First Kyle, 10, quiet, always listening for Dad's boots. Then Becca, 12, eyes constantly flicking toward the front door. Then Jenna. "We're leaving," I whispered. "Right now. No questions." They looked at me like I was sunrise, like I was the first real thing they'd seen. We crawled out the basement window, one by one, me first, then Jenna, then the others. I held their hands tight. The ground outside was damp, the grass cold. Our feet were bare. We ran 4 blocks down Mayflower, cutting through backyards, hearts pounding as we dodged motion lights and leapt over hedges. The pavement scraped our souls raw, but we didn't stop. Not until I saw the hazy glow of the gas station sign off Route 41. That light, it was everything. We barreled through the glass doors, panting, smeared with dirt and blood. The clerk, young, bleach-blonde hair under a flannel jacket, just stared at us eyes wide. "What the hell?" "Call the police," I gasped. "Please." He hesitated, then turned the lock behind us with a loud click. That sound. It felt like safety for the first time in years. The cops showed up fast. Red and blue lights danced across the refrigerator doors behind us, flashing over bags of chips and bottles of soda. The clerk handed us water and a pack of cheese crackers. We sat on the floor by the ATM. Jenna clung to my hand like a lifeline. Kyle stayed silent, eyes on the tile. Becca stared out the window, frozen, like she expected Dad to appear at any second, dragging us out by our collars. When the cruiser doors swung open, the officer blinked, confused, like he hadn't expected this. Then he looked at our feet, bloody, blistered, saw the faint bruise on Jenna's cheek. Something shifted in his face, like the reality caught up to the training. He crouched in front of me, gentle. "I'm Officer Mendes," he said. "You're safe now. Can you tell me what happened?" So I did. I told him everything. The beatings, the locked closets, the time Mom pressed a metal spoon against Becca's palm for stealing peanut butter. I told him about Dad going silent for days, then exploding like a time bomb, about how we weren't allowed outside, about Matt, how he ran away and no one looked. And I told him about Jenna, about tonight. He didn't interrupt, didn't even write anything down. Just listened, his jaw tight, eyes glassy. When I finished, he looked at the other officer and said, "Call it in, all of it." They wrapped us in blankets, gave us socks. In the back of the cruiser, Jenna finally dozed off, her head resting in my lap. Kyle whispered, barely audible, "I want pancakes." Like that was the biggest dream he had left. They took us to Beckley Memorial for a medical exam. It was the first time anyone really looked at us. Not just glanced, looked. Saw the bruises, the scars, the way Becca winced when a nurse reached out. They didn't just take photos, they asked questions, and they believed us. And by sunrise, our parents were in handcuffs. The trial came quickly, faster than we expected. Turned out, I wasn't the only one keeping a record. When CPS and the police searched the house, they found Becca's drawings, hidden in school notebooks, scenes of those nights. Dad's twisted face, Mom with the wooden spoon raised like a weapon. They found my Bible too, the pages crammed with dates, injuries, punishments, down to the weather. I'd written like I was afraid no one would believe me without proof. And then there were the cameras. Dad had installed hidden cameras in the hallway and living room, not for protection, but for power. What he didn't realize was, they captured everything. The prosecutor played the tapes. The courtroom went silent except for the screaming, the slaps, the sobs. You could hear Dad's boots stomping down the hall. Mom's voice, shrill, calling Jenna a disgusting little snake after an accident. They showed it all. I didn't cry. Not once. I sat there, hand in Jenna's, staring forward, watching my parents unravel. Dad shook his head, whispering, "You turned on me." Mom didn't cry until she saw the jury watching her. The judge didn't take long. Life in prison. No parole. No visitation. We didn't cheer. We just walked out of the courtroom into a world that didn't feel real. Cold, but clean. Quiet, but safe. Foster care was strange. You spend so long surviving, you don't know how to just be. The first family, the Hammonds, had a welcome sign on the porch and a fridge full of food. Kyle asked if he needed permission to use the bathroom. Becca wore her sweatshirt for 2 weeks, even to sleep. Jenna flinched anytime someone laughed too loud. I kept waiting for the belt, the scream, the locked door, but it never came. Eventually, I learned how to breathe again, the kind of breath that fills your whole chest. I stopped checking over my shoulder. I stopped counting steps to the back door. And I wrote. Not in secret anymore. I filled journals with poems, stories, letters, to the girl I used to be. At 18, I aged out of the system. But by then I had my acceptance letter to Marshall University. Social work, no question. I knew exactly what I needed to do. The system had failed us, but it didn't have to fail someone else. Jenna's thriving. She loves science. 4th grade now. Becca's in high school, wants to be an artist. Kyle's still quiet, but he smiles now. Real smiles. The kind that don't come with punishment. Sometimes people still ask, "What happened to your parents?" And I tell them the truth. When I signed the lease at 14 Rosefield Lane, I honestly thought I'd finally found peace. The place was nothing fancy, a modest duplex tucked into Spokane Valley. But it had a little garden out front, a slanted roof, and a quiet view of pine trees that reminded me of summers I used to spend at my grandmother's. After a year in a decaying apartment downtown, walls thin as paper, sirens screaming at all hours, neighbors fighting like it was their job, I was desperate for quiet. When this unit opened up, I didn't hesitate. Don, the property manager, was in his late 60s, slow-moving, with deep lines in his face, and a voice like gravel soaked in coffee. As he handed me the keys, he muttered half apologetically, "The Graysons live on the other side. They're quiet. Keep to themselves. Had a rough go these past few years." I nodded and didn't press. Back then, I thought keeping to yourself was a good thing. The Graysons, just Mrs. Grayson and her daughter Camilla, lived in the other half of the duplex. I saw Camilla for the first time 2 days after moving in. It was just after 9 p.m. The sky had settled into that soft blue of early twilight. I was stepping out to take a call when I noticed her. She was sitting cross-legged on the roof, barefoot, wearing this long, gauzy gray nightgown that fluttered slightly in the breeze. Her skin looked nearly translucent in the fading light, and she was humming, some slow, off-key lullaby that hung in the air like fog. I stood there for a moment, phone forgotten. Something about it felt delicate, like I'd walked into a moment that wasn't meant for me. I slipped back inside quietly. After that, it became routine. Almost every night, around the same time, Camilla would climb out the window, always the same one, probably her bedroom, and perch on the roof, humming that strange, droning tune. She never acknowledged me, even when I was just a few feet away, watering the basil or sipping tea on my porch. At first, I thought she was just a little off. Maybe one of those artsy teens who wear vintage dresses and write sad poems. But then I started hearing her in the mornings too. Long before dawn, walking barefoot along the fence line, fingertips dragging across the wood. Once I opened my bedroom blinds just in time to see her staring into the pine trees, motionless. Her lips were moving, barely, like she was whispering something no one else could hear. I mentioned it to my sister during a late-night call. "She sounds intense," she said. "You think she's okay?" "I don't know," I replied, watching Camilla from my window. "She hums the same song every night, same exact tune." Eventually, I decided to speak to her. It was early August, the air thick with wildfire smoke. Everything smelled scorched and metallic. She was passing by my garden when I said, "Hey, I hear you humming sometimes. That song, what is it?" She stopped, tilted her head like she was straining to hear something distant. "It's Ivy's lullaby," she said quietly. "Ivy?" I echoed. Camilla looked at me, her expression unreadable, somewhere between sorrow and pride. "She still needs it." Before I could ask who Ivy was, she turned and walked back inside. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I Googled Ivy Grayson and our address. The first article I found was dated 2 years ago. Teenager dies in house fire on Rosefield Lane. Ivy Grayson. The name kept echoing in my mind. She still needs it. The next few days were a blur. I found myself humming the lullaby without realizing it, under my breath while brushing my teeth or folding laundry. I told myself it was just grief, Camilla's strange way of coping. But things started happening. It began with the plants. One morning, I stepped outside to find every potted plant overturned, soil scattered across the porch like someone had tried to dig something up. The rosemary bush was snapped in half, and the ceramic frog my nephew gave me lay in 2 neat pieces. Then came the hair. I opened my mailbox one evening and froze. Inside was a clump of hair, long, dark, and eerily similar to mine. I stood there for a long moment, then dropped it into the trash, hands trembling. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe some bored kid playing games. That's what I told myself. But 2 nights later, I found something taped to my kitchen window from the outside. It was a pendant, a tarnished silver teardrop locket on a chain. My name was carved into the metal in clumsy, jagged letters like a child had scratched it in with a needle. Inside was a photo I'd never seen before. A dark-haired girl with a half smile, glancing over her shoulder in what looked like the backyard behind our duplex. I stopped sleeping well after that. Started keeping the lights on in the living room even during the day. I tried to tell myself it was all Camilla. Grieving, unstable maybe. But how do you confront someone about things like this? About lockets with your name on them, photos you've never taken, hair that could be yours? On August 7th, just before 10 p.m., there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Camilla barefoot again, holding a small velvet box in both hands. "It's your birthday," she said, her voice soft. "I made this for you." It wasn't my birthday. I took the box, hesitant. Inside was a lock of blonde hair curled like a ribbon. It was mine. "I needed it," I said, voice barely above a whisper. My throat felt tight, raw. Camilla stood on my doorstep barefoot, her eyes glassy in the porch light. She looked at the lock of hair in the box like it was a sacred object. "It's the only way Ivy listens," she said almost reverently. I blinked at her. "Camilla, where did you get this?" She didn't answer, just offered a soft, distant smile and said, "Don't stop humming." Then she turned and drifted away, as if the conversation had ended. I watched her climb onto the roof about 30 minutes later. The sky was dark now, the stars barely visible behind the haze of wildfire smoke. At first, she was alone. Then my breath caught. There was someone behind her. Another figure, smaller, hunched, seated in the shadows. The porch light barely reached that far, but I saw enough. A nightgown blackened and scorched like crumbling ash. Wet, stringy hair hanging low over her shoulders. She sat still facing Camilla, and in that instant, Camilla leaned forward slightly, still humming. I blinked. The figure was gone, but Camilla kept humming, and I didn't sleep. By morning, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I crossed the driveway, walked up to Mrs. Grayson's door and knocked. It took a long time before it opened. She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks, pale, hollow-eyed, her lips dry and cracked. "Hi," I said hesitantly. I need to talk to you about Camilla." She stepped outside and pulled the door shut behind her. "Is something wrong?" I swallowed hard. "She's been leaving strange things. A necklace with my name carved into it. Hair, mine. And last night I saw her on the roof. She wasn't alone." Mrs. Grayson didn't even flinch. She just pressed her lips into a faint, tight line. "She does that when Ivy's close," she murmured. I stared at her. What do you mean?" She let out a tired sigh. Camilla and Ivy were close. More than sisters, really. After Ivy died, Camilla didn't speak for nearly a year. Then one day she started humming that lullaby, the same one they always sang together. And sometimes Ivy comes back. My chest tightened. "You believe she's still here?" Mrs. Grayson didn't blink. "We don't question it anymore. We've learned not to interrupt them." I shook my head. "I'm sorry, but this isn't normal. She's involving me now. She left a box with my hair in it." She only includes the ones Ivy chooses, she said softly. Those words hit harder than I expected. I stepped back, heart thudding in my ears. I think I need to talk to someone about this. You do what you need to, she said, turning and going back inside without another word. I didn't call the police, didn't report anything. I wish I had. But something deeper than fear, held me back. Not logic, not pity, just instinct. I didn't want to provoke her. That night, I locked every door and window, unplugged my speakers, turned off anything that could make a sound. Still, as I lay in bed, I heard it. Faint, muffled, but unmistakable. Camilla. Humming through the wall. I decided then and there. I was leaving. I called Don the next morning, told him there were family issues and I didn't feel safe. He didn't argue, just sighed and said, "You're not the first." 3 weeks. That's all I lasted. The night before my move, I couldn't sleep. My suitcase was half packed, sitting by the bed. I kept trying to distract myself, scrolling, reading, organizing, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. It was after midnight when I finally dared to look. I pulled the blinds back just a crack. Camilla was there, but she wasn't sitting cross-legged this time. She was crouched low, hair hanging like a curtain over her face, swaying slightly. The humming was faster now, unsteady, panicked. Her whole body rocked with it, back and forth. And then I saw her. Ivy. Clearer now, as if my eyes had finally adjusted. The soot-stained nightgown, the gaunt, expressionless face. She sat perfectly still, fingers twitching in short, sharp movements, her head tilted slightly as though listening closely. Then, as if choreographed, both of them turned, stared directly at my window. I shut the blinds. That was the last time I saw them together. I left at sunrise, didn't say goodbye, didn't look back. I never opened that velvet box again. I tossed it into a gas station trash can an hour outside of Spokane, heart racing like I'd thrown away something cursed. But I couldn't forget what Camilla said. It's the only way Ivy listens. For weeks, I couldn't bring myself to play music. I avoided lullabies. I avoided humming, even under my breath. I kept glancing over my shoulder when the house creaked. Then, on my last night in the new apartment, as I was cleaning up, I found it. A cassette tape. Slipped under the door, the label read in shaky handwriting, "Lie." I hesitated, then played it. Camilla's voice. Quiet. Urgent. "You made her angry when you stopped humming. I don't know if Ivy is real. I don't know if Camilla and her mother were broken by grief or if something darker crawled into that space between loss and longing. But I hear that lullaby in my dreams now, and I never hum, not even under my breath. Because whatever Ivy is now, she isn't resting, and she doesn't like being ignored. Grief twists things, warps the air, turns memory into ritual, love into something colder and more demanding. Not all comfort brings peace. Not all songs are meant to be sung forever. And sometimes silence is the only thing that keeps you safe. I moved into 101 Oak Ridge Court the first week of October, a quiet gray two-story nestled on the edge of a sleepy neighborhood just outside Binghamton, New York. The air smelled like damp leaves and the last breath of summer, and the whole house creaked like it had a voice of its own. I didn't care. It was clean, affordable, and for the first time in a long while, mine. After ending a 4-year relationship that drained me emotionally, I was desperate for stillness. My ex had a way of turning every feeling into a transaction. Affection traded for silence. Kindness doled out only when he got something in return. I'd spent years tiptoeing through conversations, through whole days, and I was exhausted. This house, tucked behind a row of maples that rustled like whispering ghosts, felt like a reset button. I met Ethan on move-in day. He came out as I wrestled with a box half my size and offered a hand and an easy smile. "You must be new upstairs," he said, grabbing the box labeled kitchen. "I'm Ethan. I live below. Promise I don't throw parties or play the drums." I laughed. Appreciated. He was charming, in a clean, curated way. Jeans with no fray, a flannel shirt with perfectly rolled cuffs, hair too tidy to be accidental. He smelled faintly of coffee and cedarwood, the kind of man who knew what image he was giving off. He carried 3 boxes for me, and I thanked him with a polite, closed-lip smile, the kind women learn early. Warm enough to acknowledge kindness, cool enough not to invite more. 2 days later, he caught me in the hallway, struggling with the printer on my desk. "Let me guess," he called from the stairwell. "HP?" I looked up, groaning. "That obvious? Those things are evil. I should know. I've been to war with one." I laughed and motioned toward the door. "Come fix it then, tech god." He did. 10 minutes tops. Afterwards, I offered him coffee and he stayed. We sat on my couch while I vented. Office politics, the team lead who never let me finish a sentence, the passive-aggressive emails that made me question my sanity. "You should file a complaint," Ethan said, his voice clipped, jaw tight. "Or better yet, let me talk to him." I waved him off. "It's fine, just annoying. I'll manage." He watched me closely. Some people just need to be removed from your life. I gave a small, uncertain smile. I wasn't sure how to respond. It felt like a protective gesture, maybe just a bit too intense. I chalked it up to him trying to be supportive, the way men often are, fixers instead of listeners. That night, I got a text from him. "Had a great time. You're different." I replied with a brief, polite thank you and left it at that. The next morning, I opened my front door to find a paper bag resting on the mat. Inside was a latte, still warm, and a croissant from the bakery downtown. Tucked beneath the pastry was a sticky note. "Figured you'd skip breakfast again." I froze. I hadn't told him I skipped breakfast, hadn't mentioned it, hadn't even realized he knew where I got my coffee. The discomfort started as a whisper, easy to dismiss. Just being nice, I told myself. Neighborly, harmless. Then it was flowers. No name, no card. Just left on the steps, always fresh. Then the way he always seemed to be around when I got home, opening his door, taking out trash, offering a wave that lasted a few seconds too long. Still, I brushed it off. It was easier that way. Until the day I found my mailbox stuffed with postcards, a dozen of them. All blank, except one. It read, "You don't have to be alone anymore." That's when I stopped replying to his messages. No explanation. Just silence. I didn't expect him to take it well, but I didn't expect what happened next. A week later, my supervisor, Jared, was attacked in the parking garage after work. No robbery, no motive. Some guy in a hood walked up and beat the hell out of him. Jared was left bloodied and concussed. He couldn't describe the guy, said he never spoke. Security footage mysteriously cut out 20 minutes before the attack. When I heard about it, my stomach dropped. The nausea came fast and sharp, like something twisting just beneath my ribs. But I said nothing. I didn't want to sound paranoid, even to myself. I told myself it wasn't connected, just coincidence. Jared's assault, the latte, the postcards, none of it had to mean anything. I clung to that thought like a shield. That night, Ethan knocked on my door. A sharp, deliberate knock, 3 beats. I opened it only a few inches, just enough to see his face and the bottle in his hand. "I brought wine," he said, lifting it like a peace offering. "Rough day, huh? Heard about your boss?" My heart seized. I hadn't told anyone outside work, not even Rachel. I stared at him, throat tightening. How did you hear about that?" He smiled softly, too softly. "You'll be happy to know he won't be a problem anymore." The blood drained from my face. I didn't say a word. I just shut the door, slowly, deliberately, and locked every bolt. I didn't sleep. Every creak in the walls became a footstep. Every shadow stretched too long. I checked the locks again and again, heart racing each time I turned a knob. Milo, my orange tabby, wouldn't settle. He paced near the window, tail lashing like he sensed something I couldn't. Around 2 a.m., he started pawing at the front door, whining, low and strange. "Shh, Milo," I whispered, scooping him up. "It's nothing. It's okay." The next morning, I found the screen door slightly open, unlatched, swinging just an inch. I never left it like that. Never. Milo was gone. I ran barefoot into the yard, calling his name. "Milo! Milo, baby, come here!" It took 20 frantic minutes before I found him, curled up under the porch, shaking, his ears flat, eyes wide. Back inside, I locked everything. Then I saw it. A sticky note, yellow, on the fridge. My fridge, written in Ethan's handwriting. I recognized the rounded E's, the straight downstrokes. "You said you needed help." My knees buckled. I backed into the wall and slid to the floor, the note crumpling in my trembling hand. I called the police. I told them everything. They listened politely, took notes. But in the end, no sign of forced entry, the officer said, shrugging. "Nothing's stolen. He probably just thinks he's being helpful." Helpful? I packed that night, threw clothes, toiletries, my laptop into a duffel, left behind the furniture, dishes, even the framed photo of my parents I kept on the nightstand. I called Rachel, an old friend from college who lived an hour away, and said simply, "I need to go, now." She didn't ask questions. When she pulled up outside, I didn't even glance back at the house. A month passed. I stayed with Rachel, slept on her couch, avoided mirrors. I filed a formal complaint with the property manager. I changed my number. And Ethan disappeared. No notes, no wine, no flowers, silence. Until one afternoon, Rachel got a letter, no return address. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper, a pencil drawing, of me, asleep, curled on Rachel's couch, blanket tucked under my chin, one arm dangling off the edge. Beneath it, in that same tidy handwriting, she still whispers in her sleep. Rachel didn't say a word. She just walked it straight to the fireplace and tossed it in. We watched it burn together. I changed my number again. Today I live in a mid-rise apartment with a 24-hour security guard and cameras in every hallway. My blinds stay drawn. I don't answer blocked numbers. I never tell my neighbors where I work. Is it exhausting? Yes. But I feel safe. And I've learned something I wish I'd known sooner. You don't control how people interpret you. You might smile to be polite. You might laugh to keep things light. You might share something small because you're lonely. But some people twist those moments into invitations. They hear yes in silence. They see hope in a closed door. You can't always spot obsession when it starts, but you can listen to that gut pull, that inner tightening, the subtle dread that says, something's not right. Don't be afraid to be rude, to say no, to shut the door and mean it. Because kindness, when misunderstood, can become a weapon. And some people only hear what they want to believe. You don't owe anyone your comfort. You don't have to make anyone feel okay at the expense of your own instincts. Boundaries don't need explanations. When someone crosses a line, even softly, even sweetly, pay attention. Your gut isn't just anxiety. Sometimes it's a siren. I moved to Cedar Falls, Vermont for the quiet. After a decade of night shifts in the ER, surrounded by sirens, flickering fluorescent lights, and the constant buzz of urgency, I needed stillness. The kind that seeps into your bones, that lingers in the silence after dusk. The kind of peace you only find in places where people still wave from their porches and kids play barefoot in the grass. Maple Grove Drive looked like something out of a magazine the day I bought the house, 3 summers ago. A row of modest ranch-style homes, each with its own white fence and a wind chime swaying lazily in the breeze. Trimmed hedges, porch swings, and cracked sidewalks where tricycles wobbled and chalk drawings faded in the sun. It felt like safety. I met the Anders family a week after moving in. Mark and Delilah, both in their early 40s, were warm in that rehearsed suburban way, smiles that didn't always reach the eyes. They had 3 children. The twins, Ellie and Max, were about 8, always racing scooters or building elaborate forts in the front yard. Their adopted daughter, Ela, was older, 12, maybe 13. They said she'd come to live with them 2 years ago after a relative passed. No more details offered. None asked. Isla didn't play. She watched. While the twins laughed and shouted, Isla lingered near the porch or leaned against the mailbox, arms crossed, head slightly tilted like she was listening for something. She never smiled. Her dark eyes trailed movement like she was studying people, me, the mailman, even birds. There was something too still about her, something tightly wound beneath her skin. At first I chalked it up to shyness or maybe grief. Kids handle loss in strange ways. But then spring came, and strange things started happening. One morning, I found one of my son Mason's action figures on our porch. It had been snapped in half. Not tossed or broken by accident, but arranged. The 2 pieces were placed precisely in a circle of small white stones like some kind of ritual. I called Mason over. "Did you leave this out here?" He squinted. "That's not mine." "You sure?" He nodded, wide-eyed. "Mine's in my room." A few days later, I saw Isla at the edge of our yard, standing unnaturally still. She held another figure, this one smeared with mud and what looked like grass clippings. Her hands were filthy up to the wrists. She made no effort to clean them. When she noticed me watching, she didn't flinch, just stared for a moment, then dropped the toy in the dirt and walked away. I mentioned it casually to Delilah one morning while we were both outside watering plants. "She's been acting oddly," I said, keeping my tone light. "Found a couple of broken toys." Delilah's smile froze. "She's going through a rough patch," she said quickly, eyes flicking back toward her porch. "Adjustment issues. We're handling it." I wanted to believe her. I did. But then came the night of June 14th. Just past midnight, I woke to a soft sound. Crying. At first, I thought it was Mason having a nightmare. I padded down the hall and peeked into his room. He was curled beneath his blanket, breathing steadily. The crying continued, muffled, distant. I walked into the living room, heart starting to thud in that slow, familiar rhythm I hadn't felt since trauma cases. I nudged the curtain aside and looked toward the Anders house. There she was, Isla, crouched on the back patio, directly beneath the porch lantern. Her face was streaked with tears and something darker. At first I thought dirt, but the shine was wrong. Thicker, blood. Red smudges ran from her eyes down her cheeks like war paint. Ellie and Max stood behind her, pressed together like silhouettes. Neither moved, not even when Isla began to rock slightly. I didn't hesitate. I threw on a jacket and walked over, knocking harder than I meant to. Delilah answered, her expression pinched, tired, but cold. "She's upset," she said before I could even speak. "It's nothing." "She looks hurt," I said. "She's not," Delilah snapped. "Just overreacting." And then she shut the door. I stood there, staring at the chipped paint for a long second. There was something behind her eyes. Not irritation, not exhaustion. Something more hollow, more deliberate. Back inside, I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat by the window, watching their house. The sobbing had stopped. No kids in sight. Nothing but stillness again. And for the first time in years, I felt a quiet, creeping fear. Not the kind you feel when you hear a bump in the night. The kind you feel in trauma bays when you know something's wrong. Deeply wrong, but can't prove it yet. The next morning, I stood at the kitchen sink pouring coffee, watching their yard. No Isla. Just the twins, sitting silently on the porch swing, legs dangling, untouched juice boxes beside them. I walked over around noon and knocked again. This time Mark answered. He looked like he'd just rolled out of bed, shirt wrinkled, hair sticking up, a tremble in his jaw. I wanted to check on Isla, I said gently. She's not here, he replied too quickly. We sent her to a counselor. Overnight program. She needed help. She left in the middle of the night. Mark nodded, but his eyes never met mine. Where's the program? I asked. He hesitated. His mouth opened like he had a rehearsed answer, but then closed again. Just a place Delilah found. It's private. Before I could say anything else, he shut the door. That afternoon, something pulled at me. I stood at the edge of my backyard, staring through the sparse trees that divided our properties. I stepped over slowly, careful not to disturb anything. Just past their sliding glass door, the earth was soft, muddy. My foot sank half an inch. I bent down, bare footprints, small, deep, the kind a kid would leave if they were running. I followed them, 10 feet, maybe 12, until they stopped abruptly near a broken sapling. Snapped at the base, clean through. Beyond that, nothing. No more prints, no drag marks, just silence. I wanted to believe Isla was safe, that they'd taken her somewhere with therapists and warm lights and careful words, but something in me twisted, cold and sour. That night, as I tucked Mason into bed, he looked up at me with wide eyes. "Can I sleep in your room?" he whispered. "Why, baby?" "The toys are making noises," he said softly. "I think they're mad." I smiled gently, brushing his hair back. "There's no such thing," I lied. Then I let him crawl into my bed and curl against me, both of us too quiet, listening for sounds we couldn't name. But after Mason fell asleep, I went back to his room. I don't even know why. Something in me just wouldn't rest. Maybe it was the way he'd said the toys are making noises, like it was a fact and not a fear. I flipped on the hallway light and opened his door as quietly as I could. The Lego figures on his windowsill had been lined up in a perfect, unnerving row. Not just placed, arranged. Each figure faced forward, arms to their sides as if in formation. But what really chilled me were the heads. They'd been removed and set in a separate, identical line across the opposite sill. Not scattered, not tossed. Deliberate, precise. Mason didn't do this. I knew that in my bones. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, jumpy at every creak, baby monitor on the armrest beside me, volume cranked up just enough to hear his breathing. 2 nights later, just past 12:30, I heard it. A sharp crack echoed from the backyard. Then another, like dry branches snapping underfoot. Close, too close. I froze. The baby monitor was quiet. Mason was safe. I ran to his room, and she was there. At the window, Isla, barefoot, nightgown torn, clinging to her thin frame. Her skin was ghost pale beneath the moonlight, smudged with dirt and something darker. Mud, maybe. Blood. Her hands were splayed on the glass, fingers spread wide. Her eyes, wide, wild, locked on mine. She didn't speak at first. Her mouth just moved. Then finally the words slipped out. "Help me." I moved fast, heart hammering, fingers fumbling at the lock. But before I could open the window, she was gone, bolting into the trees behind the Anders house. Her nightgown caught on a low branch and ripped as she ran, fluttering like a torn flag before vanishing. I called 911. They arrived in 10 minutes. 3 cruisers, a K9 unit, flashlights cutting through the dark. They swept the woods. I watched from the back step, arms crossed against the cold, stomach knotted. They found nothing. No footprints, no fabric, no Isla. I told them everything. The crying, the blood, the toys, the footprints that had stopped at the broken tree. I told them what I saw in the window. One of the officers stayed behind as the rest canvassed. His name was Lucas. Young, Calm voice. Kind eyes. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "have you had any sleep issues lately?" I stared at him. "You think I imagined her?" "No," he said, holding my gaze. "I think you've been through a lot. Sometimes our minds. I know what I saw. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to." He looked away first. That morning, the Anders house stayed dark, curtains drawn, no twins on the porch, no wind chimes moving. By sunset, a moving truck pulled into the driveway. No goodbye, no knock. They didn't even pack everything, just loaded what they could and drove off. I told myself to let it go, that it wasn't my business. That maybe Delilah really did find help for Isla. Maybe the girl was troubled, or maybe I was projecting. Maybe all those years in the ER had finally caught up with me, my nerves rewired, my brain too eager to find danger in stillness. But then, a week after they left, I found the notebook. It was half buried beneath the hedge between our houses. The cover was bent plastic, the kind you'd find on a cheap spiral notebook from the dollar store. Sun cracked, edges torn. I wouldn't have looked twice if I hadn't seen the faint scrawl on the first page. Isla. Messy, looping handwriting like a child trying to make it pretty and failing. I sat on the porch and turned the pages with shaking fingers. Drawings, dozens of them. Dolls, some stick figure simple, some intricately detailed. All missing limbs, all with black circles for eyes. Some had jagged lines down their torsos, like stitches. Again and again, in the margins, at the top of pages, in the mouths of the dolls, the same phrase repeated: "Find the lost parts." The final page wasn't a drawing, it was a photo. A blurry, poorly cut photograph of the twins standing in the yard. Beside them, Isla. But her face had been scratched out, deeply, violently, as if whoever held the pen had done it over and over until the paper tore. My hands shook as I closed it. That night I checked every lock, twice. Mason's nightlight glowed softly in his room. I sat in the living room in the dark, lights off, gripping a kitchen knife I'd never used for anything but opening packages. At 2:03 a.m., I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. The front door. Soft, deliberate. I didn't move. I didn't open it. I didn't sleep. The police never followed up. When I called, they said the Anders family hadn't left a forwarding address. The house had been handed over to a property manager. There was no active investigation into Isla, no missing persons report, nothing they could share. It's been over a year. The house remains empty, and sometimes I still dream of her. Not always nightmares. Sometimes she's just standing in the yard beneath the lantern watching. Other nights, she's closer, knocking, whispering, and I still find Mason's toys rearranged. Heads gone, pieces tucked inside drawers, under couch cushions, inside his pillowcase. Once I found a drawing taped to the fridge. Crayon, red and black. A stick figure with X's for eyes. I didn't put it there. Neither did Mason. Last fall I burned the notebook. I stood outside with the fire pit and fed each page into the flame, watching the smoke curl up into the night sky. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. I don't know what happened to Isla, whether she ran, whether she was taken, or whether something worse found her in the woods behind our homes. But I remember her eyes, the way she whispered, "Help me," and the sound of her hands pressed against the glass. Maybe I failed her. Maybe she was broken in ways no one wanted to see. Or maybe she wasn't the danger. Maybe she was the warning. Now I lock every door, every window. I teach Mason to trust his instincts, his fear. Because monsters don't always knock. Sometimes they already live next door. And the scariest things? They're not the ones that leap out of shadows. They're the ones that smile too wide. The ones behind closed curtains. The ones that vanish without a trace. Always listen when someone asks for help. Especially when no one else will. After the court dates, the restraining orders, and too many nights sleeping with a kitchen knife under my pillow, I finally broke. I packed up everything we owned into a used blue SUV and drove north. Just kept going until the roads thinned out, the trees thickened, and the air stung my skin like regret. Fairbanks wasn't some dream destination. It was just far enough. And right then, that was all I needed. The duplex at 82 Milner Street looked like it hadn't been loved in years. Beige siding faded from too many winters, a porch that sagged like tired shoulders, and a front yard buried in snow. But the rent was cheap, the landlord didn't pry, and most importantly, the walls didn't echo memories. The man next door, Greg Hartwell, introduced himself while shoveling his steps. He wore a thick parka and scuffed work gloves, mid-40s maybe, solid frame, kind eyes. His voice was calm, a little scratchy, like he'd been through more winters than he cared to count. He offered me some firewood, helped me salt the porch, said it was just neighborly. And somehow, for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I had to flinch at every sudden movement. Maisie, my 6-year-old, adored him almost instantly. He had a way with her, gentle, patient, told silly jokes, left her little peppermint candies in the mailbox, even whittled her a tiny wooden rabbit from scrap pine. Used to carve toys like this for my own, he mumbled once, eyes fixed on the snow. I didn't ask. Some people's pasts were like cracked ice, press too hard and you both go under. A couple weeks in, I started using the basement laundry. The stairs groaned underfoot. The air was cold and smelled of mildew. One naked bulb swung overhead, flickering like it had a secret. Our side was cluttered. Boxes, old furniture, spider webs thick in the corners. His side was sealed behind a heavy steel door. 2 deadbolts. A rusted latch. It always made my skin prickle. I asked about it once casually. Greg said it was a storm shelter. Built it back in '03, when a freeze burst the pipes out in Denali. Habit stuck, he said with a shrug. I nodded like I believed him. Then one afternoon, Maisie came up from the basement cradling that same wooden rabbit like it was brand new. She looked puzzled. Greg said his daughter dropped it behind the boiler a long time ago, she said, but it was still warm. That night, I dragged a chair under the doorknob before bed. On January 5th, the storm came. Heavy snow, howling wind, temperatures diving below -30. The windows rattled in their frames like they were begging to get out. Around 7 p.m., the lights flickered once, then died. The whole block went black. I lit some candles, checked my phone. No signal, not even a whisper of a bar, just the soft blue glow of snow through the living room window. 5 minutes later, Greg knocked. Heat's out, he said, arms crossed tight over his chest, breath fogging the air. Mind if I come in for a bit? I hesitated. The storm was real and I wasn't cruel. He looked cold, bone-deep cold. So I let him in just for a little while. He held his hands out toward the electric fireplace. Useless without power, but the illusion comforted him maybe. Then he turned to Maisie. You finished that drawing you showed me last week? He asked with a half smile. She looked up at him confused. I didn't show you any drawing. His smile stayed, but his eyes didn't. They just stopped moving, like his face was stuck in someone else's memory. Oh, he said, too lightly. Must have dreamed it. He stared at her too long after that. Not like a friendly neighbor anymore, like he was trying to remember the curve of her cheek or the weight of her little hands. I excused myself, went to the kitchen, started boiling water for tea. The kettle shrieked, high and sharp. When I came back, he'd locked the front door. We should go to the basement, he said, calm as ever. Safer down there. Wind breaks a window, you don't want Maisie getting frostbite. My stomach twisted. I think we're fine up here, I said, voice steady, hands not. He glanced at Maisie, who sat stiff on the couch, eyes locked on me. Something in her face, panic, recognition, snapped me into motion. "I've got snacks and blankets down there," he said gently. "She might even find another one of those rabbits." I stepped in front of my daughter. "Greg, I need you to leave. Now." His head tilted slightly, like I'd said something rude. "You shouldn't talk to me like that." I didn't wait. I grabbed Maisie's wrist and yanked her with me down the hall. We locked ourselves in the bathroom. My fingers were trembling as I tried to call 911. No bars, not a single damn one. Outside the door, his voice came through, soft as falling dust. "My girl used to scream like that too," he said through the door, voice low, almost fond. "But she came around. She always came around." Maisie was trembling in my lap, her tears hot against my neck as she tried to muffle her sobs. I pressed my ear to the door, straining for any sound. Nothing. No footsteps, no breath. Just silence so dense it felt deliberate. Then the light under the door faded. His shadow filled the crack. "We'll talk when you calm down," Greg murmured. "This isn't how I wanted it to go." I clenched my jaw to keep my fear from spilling out. I looked around the cramped bathroom, eyes landing on the small frosted window near the ceiling. Narrow, half frozen. But maybe, we could squeeze through. I wrapped Maisie tightly in my coat, whispering, "You first. Don't stop running once you're out." She nodded, trying to be brave, and I lifted her up. Her legs thrashed as she pushed through the tight frame, the cold air slamming into the room like a warning. Then I heard it. 2 small boots crunching into snow outside. I didn't hesitate. Ignoring the sharp sting in my ribs, I shoved myself through the window. Ice tore across my hip. I hit the ground hard, knocking the breath from my lungs. But I was out. No porch lights, no neighbors in sight, just black sky and snow swirling in wind. I grabbed Maisie's hand and ran. The snow was thigh-deep, and my slippers were soaked within seconds, but I didn't stop. My heart thundered. My breath came in bursts. We didn't look back. 2 blocks felt like miles. Finally, I saw a porch light. Yellow, flickering. A small, 1-story home with a retired couple I'd only met once, weeks ago. I pounded on the door. The man answered, his eyes wide. His wife behind him looked terrified. "Please," I gasped, voice raw. "Call the police. He's trying to take my daughter." They let us in, wrapped us in blankets, called. It took 20 minutes for the police to arrive. When they did, I led them straight back to the duplex. But Greg was gone. No footprints in the snow, no tire tracks, no sign of anyone leaving or ever being there. Inside, nothing was out of place. Our unit was undisturbed, door still locked from the inside. On his side, the heat was on. 2 mugs sat drying in the sink. Clean, staged. It didn't feel lived in. It felt arranged. The locked basement door gave way after they used bolt cutters. What was behind it changed everything. A cot with leather restraints. A dented metal bucket. Crayon drawings taped to the concrete. Family portraits with the mother scribbled out. The daughter always crying, the father grinning. Child-sized shoes, lined up in eerie precision. Names written on the wall in shaky hand. Kay, Mira, Tessa. None of them were Maisie. Scratches scored the walls. Dozens of them. Tiny fingernails embedded in the cement like someone had tried to claw their way out. A dusty photo lay on the floor, scrawled with names on the back. Every one of them a question with no one left to ask. The name Greg Hartwell didn't match any real person. No license, no utility records. Rental paid in cash. A phantom wrapped in skin. Weeks later, when the ground thawed, they brought in cadaver dogs. Behind the duplex, beneath a crooked pine tree, they found 2 shallow graves. Children, no IDs, no missing persons reports matched. Just handmade crosses fashioned from branches and small wooden animals left at each grave's base. We left Fairbanks the next day. Maisie didn't speak for 3 weeks. I didn't sleep for longer. We moved south to the Pacific Northwest, changed our names, erased our online footprints. We live quietly now. No neighbors closer than 100 yards. I run background checks on anyone who even talks to my daughter. There's a waiting period just to meet her, but some things don't stay buried. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of a shadow in a doorway when I come home late, even when I know I locked the gate. Sometimes there's a knock, soft, deliberate, at the back door just after dark. I freeze every time. Maisie still has that rabbit. I tried to throw it away, twice, but both times, it ended up back on her bookshelf like it had never moved. She doesn't talk much about that night, but once, I asked if she remembered what he said on the stairs. She looked up slowly. Her voice was small, flat. He said I reminded him of his real daughter, the one who didn't come around. That was when I realized Greg wasn't just a man. He was a collector of silence, of secrets, of lost things no one missed until they were too far gone to find again. And kindness, unchecked, unquestioned, can be deadly. We teach ourselves to be polite, not to offend, but survival doesn't come from courtesy. It comes from instinct, from listening when something in your gut whispers wrong before your brain catches up. Because sometimes the most dangerous door is the one someone else has already locked from the inside.